All right, ready to dive in. Today we're tackling something I bet you see all the time, but probably don't think too much about.
Hmm, let me guess.
The American flag. You know, the one we pledged allegiance to back in school?
Yeah, makes sense. It's so common we might not even realize it's actually kind of unique, like compared to how other countries view their flags.
Totally. And trust me, there's a whole lot more to that Star-Spangled Banner than meets the eye. We're going to uncover some surprising stuff.
Oh, I love a good surprise. What kind of surprises are we talking about? Like, are there any myths we should be ready to bust?
You bet. Like that whole red for blood, white for purity, blue for justice thing.
Yeah, that's a
It's
classic.
catchy, right?
Super catchy, but also totally made up.
Yeah, it's a good example of how we want symbols to have meaning. So we come up with these like nice and tidy explanations, but they're not always true.
Right, like in this case, those color meanings, they actually came about way later, like around the 1960s. But those early years, way more chaotic, less unified.
Yeah, just picture it. The Revolutionary War. But instead of one standard flag, it's just tons of militias with their own unique flags.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Like, don't tread on me, rattlesnakes, all sorts of creative designs.
Now that you mention it, I do remember seeing those.
And get this, the Continental Army even flew a flag with the British Union Jack in the corner.
What? Really? Why would they do that?
That's the Continental Colors flag.
Huh.
And it kind of shows how the idea of like a unified American identity was still developing back then.
Yeah, that makes sense. Things were so new back then.
Even George Washington was like, maybe we shouldn't be flying the enemy's flag.
I bet that was a little awkward.
Talk about an awkward moment, right?
Uh,
But it shows that the flag wasn't seen as like this super sacred, untouchable thing then.
yeah, it wasn't like today.
More of a practical tool for identification on the battlefield and at sea.
Makes you wonder how they decided on the design in the first place.
Well, some of the early flags had stars with like different numbers of points.
No way, really.
5, 6, 7, even 8 points. Things got standardized later as the flag became more symbolic.
The evolution of a symbol.
Speaking of symbols, we got to talk about Betsy Ross. It's a great story, right?
Yeah, I remember that one.
George Washington walks into her shop. She whips up the first American flag. Instant legend.
But I have a feeling you're going to say it's not entirely true.
Sadly, yeah, it's more myth than fact.
Oh.
Betsy Ross was a real upholsterer in Philadelphia, and she probably did make flags. But there's zero evidence for that famous story.
Oh, man. So no late night visit from Washington?
Nope. That story actually came out way later, passed down through her family before becoming this big national legend.
It's interesting how these stories take hold, like why that one?
Right. I think we love simple origin stories,
Yeah.
especially for things like national symbols. We want clear narratives and heroes.
Yeah, it makes it easier to like grasp the meaning. But the real story is always more complex.
Way more complex. And sometimes those myths overshadow the real people who contributed. Like, remember we mentioned Francis Hopkinson?
Refresh my memory.
He designed the Great Seal of the United States.
Oh, right.
Well, he's actually the most likely designer of the first American flag.
Interesting. But he doesn't get the same recognition as Betsy Ross, does he?
Not even close. It's crazy how some figures and stories get remembered and others just fade away.
It really shows you how history is written, doesn't it?
For sure. But for historians, it's all about the evidence. And the evidence points to Hopkinson.
Even though it doesn't make for as good of a story.
Exactly.
Mm.
Okay, so we've busted some myths and seen how things were kind of messy in the beginning. But how did the flag go from like a practical tool to this huge symbol it is today?
That's a big jump. I'm curious about that too.
Well, the Civil War was a turning point. Before the war, everyday Americans rarely flew the flag.
Seriously, I would have thought it was always a big thing.
It was mostly a government and military thing, but when the flag came down at Fort Sumter, it sparked this wave of patriotism in the North.
Huh. So it took a war to really solidify the flag's meaning?
Basically, yeah, it was like this almost religious awakening. Flags started popping up everywhere. Homes, businesses, even on clothes.
Wow, so before the Civil War, people just didn't have flags on their homes.
Nope, not really. But then, boom. Historians even call it the cult of the flag. This newfound reverence for it as a symbol of unity, especially when the country was so divided.
Makes sense. It gave them something to rally around, a symbol of what they were fighting for.
Exactly. It became this tangible representation of their beliefs. And that emotional connection has stuck around.
And it didn't fade away after the war ended?
Not at all. Actually, the cult of the flag kept growing. helped by groups like the Daughters of the American Revolution and the Push for Flag Day.
So by the late 1800s, it was no longer just a tool. It was this symbol of national pride, deeply ingrained in American culture.
Talk about a transformation.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling the story doesn't end there.
You're right. The flag kept evolving right along with the nation. And you know what else played a big role? Wars. Each conflict, added another layer to what the flag meant. Like the Revolutionary War, it became the symbol of independence.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And then the War of 1812 kind of doubled down on that national pride, that we won't back down attitude.
And then the Mexican War. That was the first one officially fought under the Stars and Stripes, right?
You got it. Really solidified its place as a, military symbol,
Big time.
And get this, a few decades later, the Spanish-American War was this huge moment of reconciliation. After all that division from the Civil War, North and South fighting together under one flag.
Wow. Yeah, I can only imagine what that must felt like for those soldiers.
Powerful imagery, right?
Totally. But then things took a turn in the 20th century, right? With those flag protection laws.
Oh, yeah. Those were interesting. It's funny, though. Those first laws weren't about protecting the flag from burning. That came later.
Really? What were they about then?
Stopping people from, using the flag to sell stuff.
Wait, so they were putting it on like products and ads?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Beer bottles, whiskey ads. People saw it as super disrespectful, like they were cheapening this sacred symbol.
Yeah, I can see how that would upset people. Like some things should just be off limits.
It was all about protecting the flag's dignity, And of course, these concerns got way bigger during wartime.
Right, that makes sense.
Like in World War I, with all that anti-German feeling, some states even passed laws saying you had to fly the flag.
Wow. So you could get in trouble for not displaying it?
Yeah.
It seems pretty intense.
Right. It shows how patriotism, even when it comes from a good place, can turn into something else.
Yeah, definitely.
And that whole debate about respecting the flag versus individual freedom, that went on through the whole 20th century.
And then the 60s hit with the Vietnam War protests and flag burning.
Mm-hmm.
That's what led to the federal flag protection law, right?
Yep, right. In 1968, Congress passed that law to outlaw flag desecration. But here's the twist. The Supreme Court actually struck those laws down, both the state and federal ones.
Really?
Said it went against the First Amendment.
So even with all that emotion around protecting the flag, the courts were like, nope, freedom of speech comes first.
Exactly. It was a huge decision. It showed how tricky it is to balance respecting symbols and protecting freedoms.
A debate that's still going on today, huh?
For sure. What does it even mean to respect the flag? Is it just outward stuff? Or is it about living up to the values it represents, even when they're hard?
Those are some deep questions, and it doesn't sound like there's an easy answer. But even though those laws are gone, we still have the U.S. flag code, don't we?
That's right. Important to remember, though, it's not actually a set of laws, more like guidelines, etiquette for how to treat the flag right.
So like how to display it, fold it, what to do if it gets old.
Exactly. You're not going to get arrested for breaking the flag code.
So it's not like illegal to let it touch the ground.
Haha, nope. That's one of those myths that just won't die. Never been a rule, not in the flag code or anywhere official.
Well, I learned something new today.
It just goes to show, you got to be careful about what you believe, especially with something like the flag.
Easy to just go with what you were told growing up or what you see online.
Right. But we got to dig deeper, look at the history and decide for ourselves.
Totally. We've covered so much, from those early days to the cult of the flag to all the legal stuff. Quite a journey. But what's the main takeaway for our listeners?
I think the big thing is the American flag, just like America itself, it's always changing, shaped by wars, compromises, changing ideas. It's like a mirror of who we are, past and present.
I like that, a mirror. Which brings up the big question for everyone listening. If the flag is a symbol of a country that's always changing, what does it mean to you right now? What feelings does it bring up? What stories does it tell? It really makes you think, like what does it mean to me, E? It's more than just a piece of cloth. It's this powerful symbol, brings up all these different feelings and memories.
For sure. And it's kind of wild how those feelings can be so different for everyone. For one person, it might be all about patriotism and unity and feeling proud to be American. But for someone else, it might be like a symbol of protest or even feeling left out of the whole American story.
Yeah, like we're looking at the same thing, but seeing something totally different.
Exactly. And it's all because of our own unique experiences, right? Backgrounds, beliefs, all that.
That's what makes the flag so interesting, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just this one thing. It's constantly changing as we figure out what it means to be American, especially as the world keeps changing, too.
It's like a conversation that never ends, you know?
We've talked about history and politics and all that, but what about everyday life? It's not just in museums and government buildings, is it?
Oh, definitely not. Think about it. You see it everywhere on clothes, cars, at games, in ads, even art. It's like inescapable.
True.
I
I never really thought about it that way. Like, it's this quick symbol for a bunch of values and ideas, but those can mean different things to everyone.
Totally. And I think that's a cool thing for all of us to do. Just as you go about your day, notice where you see the flag and what it means to you way in that moment. Like, does it change depending on where it is? Who's using it? What does it make you feel?
I like that. Kind of flipping the script, making our listeners part of this whole deep dive thing.
In the end, that's what I love about the American flag. It's not just some old thing from the past. It's this living, breathing symbol that keeps us talking, keeps us questioning, and makes us really grapple with what it means to be American.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Huh?
Well, as we wrap up this deep dive into the American flag, I gotta say, this has been really eye-opening. I realized I was kind of taking it for granted.
Same here. It's amazing how much there is to learn about something we think we already know.
Always more to discover, right?
Yeah.
New ways of looking at things.
And hopefully our listeners are feeling that same spark of curiosity.
We hope so. Keep asking those questions, keep exploring, and keep those deep dives going, everyone.